Good evening, everyone. It's Christopher Hale here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm glad to be here tonight. I hope everyone's having a good evening. It's an incredible honor to be here tonight with Mrs. Betty Fraley. Betty, as many of you all know, if you don't know Miss Betty, you hope you will get to know her tonight, is the undisputed queen of Franklin County. She's an educator, a lifelong educator, a lifelong Tennessean. She's an advocate for Franklin County. She's a graduate of MTSU. She actually went to Middle Tennessee State University, where she met her husband, George, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. George Fraley was a lifelong public servant. He first served in the military, took that sacred oath in the United States military, and then later as county executive, and then as a state representative in Nashville. And I told Betty this a while back, but when I get elected to this seat, to the United States Congress, I'm going to have a photo of George and Betty Fraley, because they are the epitome of public service in our community. Every night before I go to bed, I think about my day. I think about this oath that I'm hoping to take on January 3rd. And I think about several times in his life that George Fraley took that oath, first as a young man in the military, and then as a county official, and then finally as a state representative, to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Tennessee, and the people of Tennessee. He was a man who did that honorably, and it's an incredible honor to be in a community formed by George Fraley. Betty, are you online with us? Can you hear us? Okay, and folks, if you all have struggled with audio because we're trying to do format tonight, just comment in the sections and we'll make any edits that we can. Betty, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, of course, George and I didn't meet until we were at MTSU. I was a graduate of Manchester High School, and George graduated Franklin County. I was a farm girl from Coffee County. I had my own cotton crop when I was in the 8th grade. When I was a junior and senior in high school, my brother was drafted, and he milked 10 cows. So I got up every morning and milked 10 cows, caught a bus at 15 till 7, and played varsity basketball at Manchester. So I've always worked hard, and so has George. George went to college 2 years, joined the Air Force, and then came back to MTSU to finish college. And I met him when I was there. And then after college, I taught school 37 years in high school. I taught accounting. And then I went to the jail for 7 years and worked there in the reentry program and taught GED at night for a total of 10 years. And so I retired when I was 82. So I've always worked.
You always have, Betty. And I think like everywhere I go in Winchester, in Franklin County, you're an icon. Tell me a little bit about you and George's marriage, and tell me about how he first started getting involved in public life and what made him decide to first run for office.
Well, his dad was a road commissioner, and that's the only thing I can think of that made him interested in first running. And he ran for the first time. Now, he always went to community meetings and county meetings, and then he ran for the first time as a county commissioner. So he served on the county commission while he worked at Arnold Center. For 13 years, he was a county commissioner during the time he worked at Arnold Center. Now, he worked at Arnold Center for 33 years as a metallurgist. He x-rayed rockets before they were launched. He was supervisor of the metallurgical lab at Arnold Center after he taught school 1 year in Tullahoma after he graduated from college, and spent a short time as an insurance adjuster after that, and then went to Arnold Center where he stayed for 33 years. So he could also serve as a county commissioner seat, but in order to be county mayor, he retired early in order to run for that. And then after county mayor seat, he went to Nashville as a state representative.
And Betty, what would you say was the defining aspect of George Fraley's public service? If you had to simplify it in a concise way for people, what defined his service to the people of Tennessee?
George was truly loved to serve the people. He loved Franklin County. Now, we lived in Tullahoma 4 years, but he could not wait to come back to Franklin County. He came to the ball games in Franklin County when we lived in Tullahoma. So his main goal was to do everything he could for this county to make it better. One of his colleagues in the legislature said George Fraley could get a grant, and he got, I can't tell you how many millions of dollars worth of grants he got for Franklin County, and said I followed him around to see how in the world he did what he did. But when he spoke at George's memorial service, he said, I can't tell you people how fortunate you are to have had him as a representative because of what he did for you. So I guess that these things that he brought back to this county, like he was in the courthouse when Nissan came. Now, please understand, George did not do these things single-handedly at all, but he was instrumental in doing so much for this county. The 4-lane from here to Fayetteville, he was so proud of because he had a big hand in that.
And so also too, I know. Can we talk a little bit about the birth of Nissan and the industry and George's work in bringing industry to Franklin County? I mean, George was a bread and butter Democrat. He was focused on 3 things that you've always told me was jobs, healthcare, and education. What was the quality of life like? How did George help improve the quality of life for people of Franklin County?
Well, just by I can't tell you how many people are employed at Nissan.
Yeah, my goodness.
And he did the solid waste thing in Franklin County, the convenience centers, and that was a big improvement. He did turn lanes for the schools, turn lanes for all the major subdivisions, turn lanes for the hospitals. And George could just see things that needed to be done. He made we have a state park, Thames Ford State Park, and that state park had a county road going by it. Well, George said, we're the only state park in Tennessee that has a county road that goes to it. I've got to get that changed to a state road so the state can keep it up. And so he did that. And just no telling how much money, just like rural fire departments. He got money for rural fire departments, and he roofed a community center. He got money to roof a community center. Just so many things that he would just think of to do. Oh yes, and when we started pre-K in Franklin County, one morning the Board of Education called and said, George, we need one more pre-K class in Franklin County. He got on the phone right then. By the end of the day, he had two new pre-K classes in Franklin County. So just whatever anybody requested, he started working on it right then. Governor Bredesen said, when you see George Fraley coming, you may as well get yes on your lips, because he's going to bother you and irritate you and come back again until you say yes.
Well, and Betty, question I have for you is, I am trying to ascend to this office in the United States Congress in the 4th Congressional District. I'm only 31. I think George started his public service in his 30s, if I'm correct, or maybe early 40s. But what would George Fraley and what would Betty Fraley expect from me if I'm honored to serve as the next congressman for our district?
Well, of course, I'm still loyal to education, and I'm certainly not pleased with the way education is going. I do not like the voucher system. I would certainly want you to do something about that if you could. Another thing George did here was refurbish the square in Winchester. There are just so many needs, and we need some industry. We need some retail in Franklin County, and we need industry in Franklin County. Of course, we have Nissan, but that's the biggest thing that we have. We have other businesses, but Nissan is certainly the biggest.
Well, and Betty, let's talk about what's going on with the buyers. Now, you're basically, if I understand, like you've been sheltering in place. What's the situation like down there in Franklin County? Are things going back to normal at all?
Well, a little bit. Now, we are just now beginning to open restaurants, and we're doing it very sensibly, I think. Of course, I listen to the local news all the time. And I heard today that they are beginning to have meetings. A lot of the meetings are still on Zoom. And one thing that I can say that one advantage that we've had with this is so many people had never heard of Zoom until this hit. And we have learned a little bit more about technology since it hit. But yes, the retail stores are opening up, and the restaurants are taking about half as many customers as they could take. They're wearing the mask, and they are social distancing. And the congregation where I go to church in Winchester, the Church of Christ, is meeting for the first time next Sunday. But they have asked that people who are high risk not come right now. And they're going to social distance.
Well, that makes sense. It seems like the right move. I think my parish here in Rutherford County, we're having our first mass, I believe, on this Sunday as well. But they have the same orders in place to not go if you're a vulnerable member, if you're sick, et cetera. And it does seem like life's slowly getting back to normal here in Rutherford County. Betty, can you talk to me a little bit about Lincoln Davis and his legacy in your community and our community, and the differences between him and Congressman Desjardins? Have you actually ever met Congressman Desjardins?
Yes, I've met him. His wife is from Franklin County.
Of course. And what's the difference between him and Congressman Davis, in your opinion? What's their leadership styles? How have they been different from each other?
I had easy access to Lincoln Davis. If I had a problem that I couldn't handle or that we couldn't handle on the state level, why we would always contact Lincoln, and Lincoln would take care of it, sometimes without even calling us back. We didn't even know he would call the people who needed the help. So it was so much easier for me to obtain help for people, and to me that's what running for office is about, is to help people. Mm-hmm. I certainly do miss not having access to help. And people kept calling here after George, after I said, I would always say, well, we're a has-been now, we can't help you. And that was the biggest adjustment I had, was not being able to help anybody. And I enjoyed the fact that I was able to give help for people who needed help.
Well, and that's, I think what you nailed on, it hit there, is something that's really poignant to me. It is a big community. There's no doubt. There's 16 counties, about 800,000 people. But to me, the first job of a representative is to be present to the people. You cannot represent, I mean, as George lived in his own life, you cannot represent who you do not know. You can't represent who you do not love. And it's been disappointing to me as a Tennessean in this district, to be frank, is that Congressman Desjardins, we don't see him very often in these neck of the woods. And I think a lot of folks feel that across the community. My former congressman in Rutherford County was a guy named Bart Gordon. And Bart served with Lincoln Davis. And Bart Gordon was a pivotal presence of my childhood. He showed up. And it seems to me that the biggest weakness, even before politics and policy with Congressman, with Congressman Desjardins, is his lack of presence in the community. I mean, I imagine that George Fraley's life and Betty Fraley's life in the 90s and 80s, 90s, early 2000s was festivals and church services and fish fries and barbecues. Being part of the community was a huge part of being in elected office. Is that fair to say?
It was 100 miles from one end of his district to the other. I was teaching school, understand. I was really involved at school. When you teach in senior high, it's just like being caught up in a vacuum. So I was teaching school, but we had somewhere to go almost every night. And if we didn't go, somebody would call and say, why aren't you here? I mean, we were public people. we were there in everything. And that's just in all three counties. Now, we just represented three counties, but 100 miles is a long way from one end of the district to the other.
Well, you see, my opinion is I love that. I think that like you have to be present, and you have to show up to things because you learn. To be a representative is not just from pie in the sky. And I think honestly, with Congressman Desjardins, my experience is that he just gets marching orders from his leadership. He doesn't actually have experience, and he listens to the voices of the people on the ground. But I imagine that George Fraley and Betty Fraley learned a lot about the issues that were affecting the three counties he represented by simply being there and showing up. I'm sure you got an earful quite a bit.
Well, the phone rang all the time.
Yeah.
We never, ever got to eat a meal without answering the phone. When we would go to a restaurant, one time we left Shoney's, and I said, George, about how many people do you think came by the table and talked to us? And he said, well, I would say at least 20. I said, I think 30. And we would go, one time we went to a restaurant, and I said, let's sit at this table that just has two chairs. So we did, so that we would just have a meal to ourselves. It wasn't 5 minutes until somebody came and pulled up a chair and had a problem. And George never, ever did not return a phone call.
Well,
he returned every phone call he ever received.
So it's fair to say that you married George Fraley, but in some ways, George Fraley married his community as well. You had to share him in a lot of ways. It seemed like he was living in two marriages in some capacity, but you were okay with that. You kind of signed up for this as well, and you yourself are a public school teacher. You were part of the community as well.
I am a public person.
Exactly.
And I love being able to help people. My preacher said one time, Betty, I think you have done more for more people than anybody I know. Now, wasn't that a compliment? But I just do it without thinking. It's just part of me, and my parents were that way.
Well, it's the legacy. It's the legacy of public service. I mean, you and George, you all met at MTSU, but it was not called MTSU back then, right? It's a teacher's college. Is that correct?
It was MTSC.
Okay. And
yeah, it was Middle Tennessee State College.
And so tell me. So you told the story for me, but tell our listeners. Tell me about the details of meeting George Fraley. This is. I think I'm 30. This is something honestly that would be unknowable because we have transit in different ways.
When George was in politics, I didn't tell this way because I was afraid somebody would misinterpret. When I was in college, it was perfectly okay. And this is 1952 through 1955. I finished in 3 years. For us to walk across the street from the college and stand on the corner, and the townspeople would pick us up and take us to town. It was a good 2 miles, I would say, from town. And so that was perfectly okay. Of course, you didn't get in the car with somebody you didn't know.
Sure.
So my 2 girlfriends and I walked across to the corner to wait for a ride to town. And George Fraley came by, and my college roommate worked in the ag department. And, of course, George was always an agriculture person. So he was taking ag classes, so she knew him. So he took us to town. We found out he was from Franklin County, and he came within a mile of my house on the way home when he would come home on weekends. So we started riding home with him on the weekend. There were really four of us rode home with him. We paid him $1 to ride home on Friday afternoon, and then we would go back with him on Sunday afternoon and pay him another $1. So that was $8. So in that day, that would buy his gas for a week. So he profited, and so did we. So that's the way I met George. And the first date we had, we went to the Franklin County Fair in 1954. And then we married in 1957.
So you all got married in 1957. So he passed away in 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's 59-year marriage. Is my math right? Give or take.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And so, tell me too. So there is a road named after George. It's right by the health department. Is that right?
Yes, it goes by the Franklin County Jail, the health department, and the criminal justice center called George Fraley Parkway. And then they also, now this was after he passed away. They called me on Monday from the city of Winchester and said they had to have a name for that road. And George had worked so hard to get this bypass. And after he lost the election in 2010, there was a meeting that next night, and of course he no longer was state representative. There was a meeting down here at the National Guard Armory the next night. So in order to make sure that road was solidified, he went to that meeting and to make sure, and so they called and wanted to name the road for George, and of course I was delighted that they wanted to do that. And then they named the bridge next to Tennessee State Park for George because he got the road made a state road in front of the state park. And then MTSU honored George by giving him outstanding alumni for the service to his community.
Well, and he clearly deserved that. I mean, it seems to me so clear that George Fraley was a man who fought hard for the people of Franklin County his entire life. And I think, as a young aspiring public servant, I got to go to the George Fraley award dinner. His leadership was not just admired in Franklin County, but across the state. You all had a guest speaker there that night. Remind me who that was. There was another state rep that came by.
John Tidwell.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. And John Tidwell, it was interesting to me because we talk about George's public service, but he was also a savvy politician. He knew how to get things done. He knew how to work the room. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. Just John Tidwell is the one who said when George Fraley would go into that room where the grant people were, that his grant would be on the bottom. But before he left, he said, now the only way you can get a grant is for yours to be in the top 10. And said he would not raise his voice, he would not do anything, but said when he came out, his grant, his request would be in the top 10. And his suite mate said, when George first came down there, said, I was just raising Cain and trying to get people to vote the way I wanted them to do and tell them what to do. And said, after about 2 or 3 meetings, George said, would you mind if I spoke to you for a minute? He said, no, so I've got a suggestion. Said, now the way you're doing this, said, you need to just win one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it one at a time. Said, now, if you do it like you're doing it, they're going to all frame up against you, and they're going to all be on you. But you just win one at a time. And the first thing you know, you're going to win you're going to make them do what you want to do.
What?
And he said, you know what? I did that and it worked.
Well, it's remarkable because what we forget is that, for example, for the United States Congress and for Tennessee, George was one of 95. For the United States Congress, when I win this election, I'll be one of 435. Being a good legislator means that you're competing against 434 other legislatures for your community. for the 16 counties of 4th Congressional District. Look, I'm not afraid to say I know how politics works. I know how to win. I know how to get resources for our community. I mean, look, George Fraley had to fight against, frankly, other communities to ensure that 4-lane road got there. Is that fair to say? It wasn't just simply given to him. He had to fight for it.
Oh, no. He had to fight and fight hard. And he got along with, George got along with Democrats and Republicans. In the day that George served, you could not tell the difference in Nashville between Democrats and Republicans.
Because they were
there one time, and this young guy was on the elevator with me, and he said, "When I grow up, I'm going to be just like your husband." And I said, "What has he done now?" And he said, "Well, he fell and busted his head wide open, and he went to the hospital and had it sewed up, came back to the legislature, drafted 3 bills with blood dripping off the back of his head. Said, when I grow up, I'm going to be just like him."
I love that. I mean, it's interesting. We have so many showboat politicians who are not workhorses, but George Fraley came to work every day. Tennessee prospered. Tennessee families were so grateful for his service. And he represents someone that I want to model my leadership after in this community. Betty, really thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you're staying safe out there. And I really appreciate you talking to me.
I am staying safe. And I'll tell you one thing I appreciate about you. You are such a hard worker. George never, ever shunned away from hard work, and you don't either. And that's the way you do. That's the way you win elections.
Well, I appreciate that.
Really hard to win the election, and then you work really hard for the people after you win it.
Well, Betty, I promise in your honor and in George's memory, I'm going to fight like hell to win this election. I'm going to fight like heck to make life better for Tennessee families when we go to Washington. And the day I get there, I want you to come at my swearing-in ceremony, and we're going to put a photo of George and Betty Fraley in my office. You understand that?
Yes, and that is really an honor, and I really appreciate that.
Well, Betty, I really appreciate you being with us tonight, and thank you so much for all you've done for our community.
It has been a pleasure. It has certainly been a pleasure. And thank you so much.
Well, guys, that is Miss Betty Fraley. She obviously is an incredible leader for our community, for Tennessee. She's a woman that I'm very honored to have her support. And I will, like I said, the model that George provided for our community, for our state, I want to take to Washington. 2 quick things, and then I'll let you go. I need your support. I need your contributions. We're raising money. It takes a lot of money to win this race. My opponent is funded by rich lobbyists from Washington. I'm funded by you and your family. Look, Scott Desjardins works for the guys who go to work in limousines and take showers in the morning. I work for the men and women who drive themselves to work and shower at night, who work by the sweat of their brow, and I'm going to fight for them, but I need you to be there with me. So even if you can only get $5 a month, I need it. It's not going to me. It's going to this campaign, to this movement. You can go to ChristopherHale.com and make a $5 contribution right now. If you want to make it monthly, I'd appreciate it. If you want signs, we've got plenty of signs out there. You can go to ChristopherHale.com/HaleYes. These are the best signs in the history of Tennessee politics. Thousands of them will dot the landscape of our community come election day, and it gets the word out about our movement. Look, we are gonna win this election. I am confident of it, but we have to do this together. I need you. I need your help. I need your support. Spread the word. Help is on the way. To every Tennessean who's struggling tonight, whether from this deadly virus, a checkered past, a dim future, inability to find work, I'm going to walk with you the entire way forward. Help is on the way. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your support. Tomorrow, I'm going to have an old colleague and boss, Mr. Michael Weir, who was President Obama's National Faith Outreach Director. Can tell you a little bit about my history. I think it's important to know about my work history. You should investigate me up and down and see who's this young man who is asking for your support. And Michael can give you a clue into that and my background. And also, too, on Wednesday, we're going to be talking to Jason Pickle. We're going to be talking to him. He's a local entrepreneur and farmer about marijuana and cannabis legalization. This is an important issue that is regaining support. It is a way to earn, to really infuse our economy and to add new resources and farming opportunities for our community. So I'm excited to do that. And then a special guest on Thursday. This has been an honor. We're slowly upgrading our studio. You'll see improvements. We're upgrading our campaign. Folks, we're going to win this election. So I appreciate everything, and I hope you have a great night.